Hello everyone, welcome back to City Skylines, to the Aurelia city. So last time we returned to the very center of the city and did the valley with the big commercial block, the residential spires and lots of detailing. We also created a new tram extension that originated from under the main train station. I wanted to make a transfer stop on this extension directly below the platforms of the train station. But since the inside of the train station was never actually finished, the topic today is going to be the rework of the train station itself. We will build new tracks, new platforms, various surfaces, and new connections. So let's go. So how exactly this process started? Well, I was just trying to figure out how am I going to build the platforms for an already existing train station building, because I obviously can't exactly work that well inside the structure because I would need to just delete it probably and build it again after I'm done with the platforms. And that's actually exactly what I did pretty much, because I was able to convert all the different sub buildings, the elements of this Berlin train station into procedural objects. So as you can see, I was just hiding all those different parts of the building after the conversion into procedural objects, so that they are still there in the game, but they are just hidden. And I can just work with all these different tracks underneath it. And once I'm done, I'm just going to, unhide it again and make it visible. I don't really need the building itself to be functional, because I am going to build, and that's actually how it was before even, I am going to build my own custom train tracks, station tracks, and I'm going to put the pedestrian paths towards them manually, so that I can have better control over where the actual platforms are and how are people going to move into this entire area. Because it's not exactly a trivial thing in City Skylines to properly set up like a big train station. You can obviously just download from the workshop like a huge train station building, and if you have luck and the train station actually works in the game how it's supposed to with all the connections for pedestrians, then yeah, sure, it can probably function very well. But in my experience, that's not exactly that's not exactly given for all the things that you download from the workshop, and sometimes it might just break if you are going to use move it on the things, or just sometimes somehow manipulate the entire structure. It usually breaks if you are doing some movements with the tracks, for example, with move it. Actually, that's exactly when it breaks. That's what I had to do with that train station, the elevated train station near that underground depot. I also had to do custom connections there. Anyway, so what exactly are we doing in here? And actually how the train station looked like before this rework, this refurbishment. Well, it was an absolute mess inside, because I only had, I think, 2 station tracks inside the building. And if you've been watching my streams, then you've seen it, that I also had the pedestrian paths kind of crossing the tracks at the same level, so it was just looking really terrible. But it was functional, it was fine until it kind of wasn't, because I really needed to expand the station as well, because I needed to include more tracks, because the city kind of expanded. I need to have at least a separate track that goes, or separate station track that goes to the airport and the depot area, the underground depot area. And on the other side, we obviously have the island city and the crater. That's where the tracks now go. But in the future, there are going to be more stations coming, of course. So what exactly am I doing over here then? So I just put a couple of, 4 tracks through the entire building. Now, when I was doing this, I kind of noticed that the actual structure of the station is not perfectly circular. It kind of widens to the center of the building and then kind of shrinks at the edges. So that was a bit unfortunate. You can see in here that I built these kinds of retaining walls on the sides to kind of measure the actual size of the building, because I can't see the building right now. So I had to have some kind of a border that's going to tell me where it goes. Then I just did these platforms. So these are network platforms. I think that these are the ones made by Titan. These are super easy to work with. They are just networks, so you can shape them to whatever kind of shapes you have. So obviously the station is kind of circular, so I need to do that. But then I needed to finally start thinking about that tram station. This is obviously the extension that I was talking about that goes into the valley that we did last time. I almost said yesterday, but it was last week, right? Now, I really wanted to have it so that it's going to be visible. It's not going to be like a complete underground station, even obviously that's not possible in the game, but somehow covered or whatever. I don't really want to do that, so I decided to have like a cutout in the tracks or in the entire platform area so that we can see down below to the tram station, to the platform of the tram station. And obviously, as you can see, the terrain difference or the track level difference is quite huge. There are maybe like I'm not really sure what's the height in meters, but at least like two heights of regular tracks height in here. I'm not really sure how to better describe it. You can probably see it for yourselves, just how deep it really is, the station. But these tracks are actually following pretty much the same level all the way from that, if you remember, that little sunken commercial area that we did such a long time ago, and the valley. That's exactly the same level. So I'm not really going with these tracks up and down too much, or pretty much not at all. So that's actually very important because I really want to keep these levels the same, so it's going to be much easier to do some kind of detailing later, or if maybe in the future I'm going to decide to do some reworks still, then it's just going to be much easier to do that. So I finally decided, like I said, to do like a cutout in those train tracks above. So I cut out one of those tracks and made it so that it's going to bypass that hole. And I started detailing the hole slightly by adding those retaining walls on the sides, kind of forming the pit for the actual stop. But that was just like a little start. I really didn't want to take it any further because I was not sure how the rest of the station is going to work. Because at this point I was not exactly sure if the bypass of the hole is really going to work, because we might have a bit too many trains arriving from this direction, and I was just not sure if only 3 entrance tracks into the station are going to cut it. But eventually it turned out to be fine. I think that the rightmost track is actually shared by 2 lines, but it's going to be fine, really. I think I'm just going to put some like priority signals in there, or priority signs there with Traffic Manager, and it's just going to work perfectly fine. In the cinematics, it was working just fine. Now I decided to, well, this is pretty much part of it, but I just really wanted to complete this entrance to the station with all these different switches. Most of these switches are kind of decorative only to give the impression of like a proper train station, because obviously you have these kinds of switches at the starts of stations. I was kind of considering doing this with like a single way tracks, because that's just going to look much more realistic, even though that's not really what I'm aiming for in Aurelia, of course, with these kinds of things. But I eventually decided to keep it semi-functional and only have a couple of these decorative switches, and only do them with the double tracks, because that's just going to make it much easier. And since some of them are decorative, it's just much better to do it this way, much faster, definitely. So that was pretty much done. I was just doing some kind of surfaces, because if you remember back before, I only did the elevated tracks, separated elevated tracks that were just going all kind of converging into the train station building. But now I decided to give like a little surface in front of the entrance to the train station where all the switches are going to be, and it's kind of going to have like a concrete surface with some sort of brighter colors that are just going to look better in the overall area. So that's exactly what I did. And now I decided to return back to the hole, to the pit of the tram stop, and kind of decorate around it a bit. So the start, or inside of the station where the tracks are kind of diverging or converging, that depends on how you look at it, I decided to provide like a little platform here, like a bigger platform with an elevator entrance, which is going to be connected to all those connections that I'm later going to do, and obviously these surfaces to nicely cover all the rest of the areas around the pit for the tram stop. So it's actually starting to look like the finished thing, and you can have a better idea how it's going to look like. I have to admit that for cinematics and probably the first person ride of that particular tram line, I am probably going to cheat a little, and I'm probably going to hide the train station building again, because I really thought that I'm going to be able to do it so that when the train station building is up there, I'm going to be able to see the sky. I was thinking that maybe I could somehow just cut a hole in the roof of the train station and let some sunlight down into this pit, but that was just not possible really to do that. Even with procedural objects, the station building would just look completely mangled because of that. And actually the cutout is at the center, so I would have to cut out the center portion of the Berlin model, and that would just not work. So I decided to do all the cinematics and probably even the first person ride without the station visible. And we might think of it as maybe if this was real life, maybe there would be like a huge like a LCD panel, on top of the ceiling, basically of the pit, and it would just show the sky, even though there would be an actual roof over the train station or something like that, some kind of justification like that. Anyways, enough of that, because now I need to explain this, because this is something that a lot of people ask me about. I thought that this is really nothing special, but apparently a lot of people struggled with this technique on how to put pedestrians to your custom train station tracks. So it's actually super simple, but you need to follow certain rules and guidelines. All right, so let's talk about that. So I placed my own custom train station tracks. So they are just tracks, but they have the special property of being station. I don't know exactly how that works in the editor or whatever in the asset making, but these are the station tracks made by, I'm not sure, Ronix, I think, or Revo, I'm not exactly sure, in that railway pack, right? So these are the fancy looking station tracks. Now, if you want to put people towards the tracks, you need to put these pedestrian paths close to them. But it's not exactly all that straightforward. What you need to do is you need to build elevated versions of this pedestrian path, and it actually doesn't matter if you want to do it for elevated station tracks or surface. Maybe you can do it with surface paths for the surface stations, but I usually just do it with elevated because it's just much easier to work with. Especially you can just do it kind of hanging in the sky, fiddle with all the different geometries and then put it on the surface, finally. And what you want to do is you want to start building the pedestrian paths directly on the station track. Not on the side of it, not close to it, but directly in the middle of the station track. That's super important to do that. You can obviously just move it away later, but it's really important that you do that. You can either start building it or end building it right there. It doesn't really matter. But you need to do it right on top of the station track. And if you are successful, then the pedestrian path is going to show you that model or that node model as if it was connected to a road. So it's going to be the railing on the side of the elevated segment is going to be cut at the node, and it's going to be built exactly on the level of the track. And one important thing again, you need to put the path, or you need to build it so that it's going to be built on level 0. It doesn't matter how it's going to look like when you are, in the process of building it, because if it's an elevated station track, you're going to aim your mouse cursor directly on the track, directly into the center of the track, and gonna press page up or page down until you reach the 0 meter elevation. And it doesn't matter at this building point whether the actual road is going to be seen, below the track or above it. It doesn't really matter. You're just gonna click it, and I guarantee you it's going to appear directly on the track at the correct elevation. It's kind of a, I don't know if I should call it a bug, because obviously the game was not really designed to work with this way. By the way, yeah, this is where I'm going to show it one more time. See, in there I started building it directly on the track, in the middle, in here again. And I was pushing page down quite a lot there because the track, the pedestrian path kind of wanted to be built maybe on the top there, on that little balcony, because technically there is another surface road, so it was kind of sticking to it. But you should not be afraid of it. And there, again, I had to press page down a lot because these tracks are all elevated. The actual terrain surface is much, much lower, but you really want to build it on the level 0. And if you're going to click in order to build it, it's actually going to stick to the track and not the surface, all right? Sometimes it might kind of glitch out if there is like a road directly underneath the track, so it's probably better to maybe temporarily like delete that road and build the path and then put the road back, with move it, Control Z, for example. But this is just how it works. And you can already tell in here in this shot that people are actually using these pedestrian paths in quite huge numbers. There is a bit of an unfortunate thing about these kinds of custom tracks, and that is that people are trying to cross the train station tracks at the sides of it. I was kind of able to overcome this by just cleverly doing these pedestrian paths so that the pedestrian paths are actually going to be the shortest path. And I also tried experimenting with creating my own pedestrian paths in the road editor so that they will have like a super high velocity, quotation marks, which is kind of like a value that's used, I suppose, by the pathfinding algorithms. And if it's a road or even a pedestrian path that has like a super high velocity basic value, then it's not like people are going to walk faster on it. It's just that they are going to think that they can walk faster on it, so that they are just going to choose that path more likely, right? There are obviously some kind of probabilities here when it comes to pedestrians and even car traffic, I suppose, in this game. So you can never really get rid of people just using the more inconvenient connections, I suppose. But I really wasn't able to get rid of the people crossing the edges of the train station tracks. It kind of looks bad. I was trying to really not have it in the cinematics, but when I'm going to do the train rides in the city, it's going to be a bit more problematic. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to deal with that. But I'm just going to do a trial and error, I suppose, record the ride a couple of times, and hopefully at least once people are not going to walk over the tracks. Anyway, that's almost done. That's the train station almost done. But I also wanted to show you some different kind of rework project that I also did kind of directly after I finished the station, or even just kind of simultaneously, because I was doing this on the live stream. So if you remember, we have built long time ago this tram tracks that go directly on the waterfront. This is obviously still the side of the city, the downtown side of the city, right, on the river. So we have built also these elevated parks over here, and all of these places are super old, and especially these parks were actually never finished because I only did the surfaces on the top, the detailing on the top, but I never really did the ceilings under the parks. And that's something that's going to be super visible from the first person of the tram. So that's something that I need to finish. You can kind of see it over here that there's just nothing, there's just nothing under these parks. And also the surfaces on the top, they don't have any textures on the bottom, so you can just see through them. You can just see the sky. So I was just preparing some kind of connections first. I was altering some of these tracks over here. We already established in Aurelia that these particular trams, probably every tram in Aurelia, can just use the batteries or maybe some kind of different charging options along the way. So it doesn't really need the wires absolutely everywhere. And this place definitely benefited from not having the tram wires. So that's why I decided to omit them from this place. And I also put this grass under the tracks. I used the different tracks that are running right on the surface level of the sidewalk, and also did like a fence around the tracks to block people from accidentally entering the tracks. Another thing that I decided to do was to rework the tracks and the road as it goes towards that main super interchange in the center of the city. That's probably like episode 1 or episode 2 maybe, when we did that little entrance for the trams directly under the main interchange in some sort of a tunnel, really. I was also doing the rework of the tunnel area. I didn't really show it in these time lapses because it was just so messy. I had to zoom inside of the structures a lot and kind of convert a lot of buildings into procedural objects that were clipping inside these tunnels. It was just such a messy project, but eventually I made it look like, almost real life with the inside of the tunnels. So when I'm finally going to do the tram ride of this line, we will be able to see it completely on its entire length, even inside the tunnels. So that's really something to look forward to. Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about, the access into the underground. And in here, I just decided to really merge the road and the tracks together because it kind of made sense. There was not much space here to work with some different geometries for the road or the tracks or different styles of the track, and also this entire place is sloped, so I didn't really want it to bother with some like grass under the tracks or something like that. So I decided to do that and then do this nice little project, this cute little like a divergence of the road and the tracks, and obviously treating the node with the intersection marking tools to provide some chevrons or do some of these different kinds of shapes here and there, the lines and stuff. So hopefully that's all going to turn out looking great from the first person view. Now the next thing that I wanted to do, and I already kind of foreshadowed it, that's the structure of the entire parks. So that's exactly what I'm doing in here. At first I thought I'm going to just do it with some props, procedural objects, whatever. But we have the magical node controller at our disposal. And you can probably already tell what I'm going to do here. So I'm basically trying to build this pedestrian path because it just has a very nice ceiling. And I'm just going to roughly do the shape of the park, at least in this area. And then I'm going to use the node controller to tilt the road. And I'm just going to put it inside of the structure or directly under the edge of the park, and it's nicely going to form this like a relatively big structure right underneath it, kind of like a concrete underbelly of the entire park area. This is not all, by the way. I'm just going to extend it much more because I really wanted to kind of finish this entire detailing with the exact same style. So I copied another instance of this path, and this time I didn't tilt it, or maybe I did just slightly, but most importantly I just made it wider. I was just experimenting with some ridiculous numbers there, as you could have seen, but now I'm just going to make the path much wider, and this one is going to form the actual like flat ceiling directly underneath it. It doesn't need to be everywhere, obviously, because there are lots of buildings that are going directly to the edge of the park, the elevated park, so this is just going to do just fine. And I was constantly looking at the first person view to check if maybe we are at the right elevations and we don't see any kind of weird clipping or any kind of weird gaps directly below that. I was kind of struggling with Move It at this point because we are in the center of the city and I need to use that non-precision movements of Move It, otherwise the game is just going to lag a bit too much. So this was not exactly all that easy, but the results are definitely worth it. Anyway, here are the cinematics of the finished train station. As you can also tell, maybe you don't remember that, but there are also these kinds of stairs. It forms like a nice square directly under the station building, and I turned them slightly darker so that it's just going to fit the area a bit more, and then I put some planters all around the structure, put some nice flowers in there. Didn't really want to do like tall trees because this just looks much better. I'm not even sure if I showed it in the cinematics. I don't think I did, but I obviously did also this second half of the entrance, or the second entrance into the station. And I should also mention that this tunnel entrance, the train, no, not this train, never mind, but the two tracks that are going in the center, they are entering the underground. And I never really did anything there. I was just thinking that that's going to be some kind of a track that's just going to lead into some future expansion of the city. It's eventually going to come to the ground level, but I eventually decided that that's going to be just some kind of a loop, some kind of a turnaround for some of the trains, and I'm going to treat it as some sort of an underground depot, all right? So the tracks are not going to go anywhere, but it's going to be like a depot or just like a underground little rail yard or something like that, all right? Because we don't have that in Aurelia just yet, and it's kind of necessary to have that, so, you know, why not do it? And I think that the trains, I'm not really sure what's the color there, I can't really see the yellow trains. I think, yeah, the second track from the right, those are going into that tunnel. Don't confuse it with the tunnel completely on the right, with the blue trains, because those are going into the crater area. That's actually a tunnel that leads back to the surface, and we are definitely going to see that line some more, because we also need to kind of complete it on the opposite side of the station. I only put like a couple, or actually one fake station somewhere so that we can actually have all the tracks populated today, but the blue line doesn't really have any purpose in the front of the station right now. It just goes between the crater and the station. That's pretty much all. Anyway, guys, the last thing I'm going to tell you is, of course, the reminder that if you liked today's video, you can click the thumbs up below, write a comment, or share it. Also, if you're new here, you can subscribe to the channel so you can keep track of the future uploads. And if you really like what I'm doing here and you want to directly support that, then you can become a channel member, which is similar to subscribing on Twitch or becoming a patron or Patreon if you are familiar with that. Either use the button below the video that says join, at least in English, or use the link in the video description. Huge thanks to all the current members. It's really appreciated. That's going to be all for today. Thank you for watching. Take care and goodbye.